The day I found out what I meant to them was the day I stopped pretending. It wasn't a fight. There weren't tears or accusations or some messy shouting match. Just a quiet, accidental glimpse into the legal draft of my parents' will. A single sentence. That's all I got. After everything, years of groceries, mortgage payments, medical bills, property taxes, loan interest, birthday dinners I couldn't afford but paid for anyway, I was summed up in a single line. My name's Daniel Rivers. I'm 34 years old, project management consultant by trade. The kind of guy who keeps his calendar color-coded and his promises inconveniently consistent. For the last decade, I've been what people politely call the reliable one in the family. Not the favorite, not the golden child. Just the one who shows up when the furnace breaks or the car won't start or the credit card interest creeps past manageable. My brother, Mason, is 5 years younger and allergic to accountability. Lives at home. Works on and off in between finding himself. My parents call him a creative spirit, which in practice means he doesn't pay rent, doesn't cook, doesn't clean, and once borrowed $5,000 from me to start a podcast that never made it past episode 2. I used to think we were a team. That what I gave freely, not for recognition, not for repayment, but because that's what family does. You hold each other up. But turns out I was the only one holding. They'd all just gotten comfortable leaning. The will came to me by mistake, CC'd in a draft email from my father's lawyer. They must have thought I was just the witness signature or some formality. The house? Left to Mason. The savings account? Mason again. The life insurance policy? Also Mason. My name came up once. No assets, no gratitude. Just to mention that Daniel has his own means. That's what I got. That's all I was to them. Self-sufficient. Therefore disposable. I didn't respond. Didn't raise my voice or start a scene. I just closed the email, poured myself a glass of water, and sat there until it got dark. Then, the next morning, I stopped paying their property tax. It's funny how quickly a house notices when the plumbing gets shut off. The first week after I cut off the money, nothing happened. No phone calls, no texts. My mom probably assumed I was just between transfers, the way she used to say with a soft chuckle when the gas bill went unpaid until Friday. I didn't owe them an explanation, so I didn't give one. Second week, my dad called. He didn't even say hello, just jumped right into, did something happen with the bank? I told him no. Just taking a break from managing their accounts. His pause was half a second too long. Then he said, well, okay, just let us know when things are back on track. Back on track. Like I was a delayed payment, not a person. I hung up without responding. By week 3, Mason texted me for the first time in months. Hey man, car insurance bounced. You cool to resend? No, how are you? No context, just a casual assumption that I'd fix it like always. I left him on read. That's when the messages started changing tone. My mother posted something vague on Facebook about how sad it is when people forget where they come from. A few of her friends chimed in with virtual hugs and comments about how sons these days don't know sacrifice. She never tagged me, but she didn't have to. I knew exactly who the performance was for. They weren't reaching out to understand. They were reaching out to control the narrative. But the real test came on the first Sunday I didn't show up with groceries. I used to come every week, eggs, bread, almond milk for my mom's stomach issues, low sodium everything for my dad's blood pressure. I'd load the fridge, fix whatever was broken, let Mason tell me about some screenplay he was thinking about writing. Then I'd leave with a hug and a quiet sense of responsibility fulfilled. That Sunday, I stayed home. I made coffee. I read a book. I existed on my own terms. At 5:12 p.m., I got a voicemail from my mother, strained and shaking. Daniel, we didn't see you today. Is everything all right? Your father had to go out and get food and well, it's just not easy for us. You know that. Call me okay? I didn't call. Because I was finally learning the difference between being a good son and being an unpaid employee with emotional obligations. And once that line gets crossed, it's hard to pretend you didn't see it. The first real sign that they were panicking came in the form of a birthday invitation. Mason's. Handwritten, which was unusual. My mother hadn't used cursive in decades, but every letter curved just enough to look sentimental. Inside was a note that said it would mean so much to the family if you joined us. Mason's had a tough year. Tough year? The same year he got the house? The same year I paid off their roof repairs, then watched him install a hot tub in the backyard like he was allergic to priorities? Still, part of me, stupid, stubborn part, considered going. Out of habit. Out of guilt. Out of that old reflex that says maybe this time they'll see you. Then I remembered the will. That single sentence with my name on it like a checkbox. I didn't RSVP. Didn't send a gift. Didn't even text. And right on cue, the guilt offensive began. My aunt messaged me. Your mom's really hurt. Mason's party was her way of bringing everyone together. You could have made the effort. Effort. I spent 10 years making the effort. 10 years of effort that never earned me more than a thanks, sweetie, and a longer list of things to fix. The part they never understood, the part I'm not sure they'll ever understand, is that I wasn't angry. I wasn't cutting them off to punish anyone. I just stopped renewing a contract I never got to read but was expected to honor forever. One that said I would always show up, always pay, always smooth over the cracks so Mason could float freely in the name of finding himself. They got so used to the safety net, they started thinking the fall was never real. But it was. Only difference was I was the one hitting the ground. They didn't miss me. They missed the groceries, the tax payments, the emotional duct tape I'd become. And now that the glue was gone, well, things were beginning to fall apart. Week 5. That's when they started remembering I had a name. I got a voicemail from Mason, of all people. His voice was soft, like he was rehearsing humility for the first time. Hey bro, I've been thinking a lot lately. I know I haven't always pulled my weight and maybe I took some things for granted. Just wanted to say I appreciate everything you've done. Seriously. I didn't delete it. I also didn't respond. Because here's the thing about Mason, he always knows the right words when he wants something. I'd heard that tone before. In high school, when he crashed my car and blamed the brakes. In college, when he overdrew our shared account on a road trip I wasn't invited to. And every time I forgave him, he called it being cool. I wasn't cool anymore. I was tired. 2 days later, my mom texted. Can we talk? I miss you. I know we haven't always said it, but we do love you, Daniel. Please don't shut us out. That one landed a little deeper. Not because I believed it, but because it was the first time in years she'd used the word please. But even that, it felt off. Like a marketing campaign after a PR disaster. The kind of love that only finds its voice when the credit card gets declined. Still, I agreed to meet. 1 coffee. Neutral ground. No confrontation. We sat on a park bench, same one where I'd once brought her tea after her surgery. She looked smaller now. Fragile, maybe? But still rehearsed. I just don't understand, she said, eyes damp. Why are you doing this now? After everything we've been through? I wanted to laugh. Everything we've been through? Like this was a shared burden and not a one-way pipeline of time, money, and quiet tolerance. I'm not doing anything, I said calmly. I just stopped doing everything. She flinched. Like the truth was louder than expected. But we're family, she whispered. No, I said. We're relatives. Family doesn't need one person to burn out for the rest to stay warm. She didn't respond. Just looked away. Maybe hoping I'd soften. Maybe hoping I'd do what I always did, fix it. But I didn't. I stood up, wished her a safe drive home, and walked away. No shouting. No scene. Just a boundary they never saw coming. It's strange how quiet life gets when you're no longer someone's emergency contact. No more 7 a.m. calls because the thermostat stopped working. No more surprise, hey, can you look at this weird letter from the bank? Texts. No more passive-aggressive voicemails that start with, not sure if you're busy, but... For the first time in over a decade, my phone went still. And with that stillness came something unexpected, peace. I started sleeping better. Waking up without that dull pressure in my chest, the one that used to show up before any family visit like clockwork. I stopped scanning every credit card charge twice, triple-checking to make sure I had enough left over to cover whatever unexpected need was next. I started breathing deeper. Slower. But peace, I learned, doesn't go unnoticed by the people who feed on your anxiety. A week later, they changed tactics. A post appeared on Facebook, my mother again, this time with a picture of Mason in the hospital. Caption. Hard times show who's really there for you. Grateful for the few who care. Others, well, silence speaks volumes. No context. No message. Just a vague, public performance of suffering with an invitation for guilt. I called the hospital not to play hero, just to check. Mason had sprained his wrist skateboarding. No surgery. No danger. No emergency. I didn't call him. Didn't message back. Because I know the game. Crisis is just currency for people like that. A way to draw you back into the role they wrote for you. And if you're not careful, you'll blink and find yourself holding the script again. You'd think my silence would have been the end of it. But no. When guilt fails, manipulation sharpens. That's when Mason posted his own message, tagged me this time. Crazy how some people only see value in what they give, not who they are. But hey, guess it was never really about love, right? I stared at that post for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it proved what I'd finally come to understand. To them, my worth was measured by what I did, not who I was. And now that I'd stopped performing, they didn't know what to do with me. The irony of walking away from your family is that everyone assumes you're angry. But I wasn't. I wasn't lashing out or throwing a tantrum. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just stopped auditioning for a role I never wanted. The responsible one. The dependable son. The one who sacrifices quietly, smiles politely, and leaves his own needs for last. What no one ever tells you is how loud things get when you choose silence. After the Facebook post, the phone started buzzing again. Not from my family, no, they'd moved on to a new strategy. Mutual friends, distant cousins, old neighbors. It started with messages like, "Hey, I don't want to get in the middle, but your mom's really worried. Mason says you haven't spoken in weeks. Everything okay?" And then, of course, the inevitable line. "They're still your family." As if blood cancels history. As if manipulation becomes love if it shares a last name. I didn't respond to most of them. The ones I did, I kept short. "I'm fine. Just taking space." I wasn't looking to start a war. But I also wasn't going to keep being the only one at the peace talks offering concessions. Then came the message from Rachel. We hadn't spoken in years. She used to live next door, babysat me and Mason when we were kids. She wrote, "I saw the post. I don't know what happened, but I just want to say I remember who kept that household running. And it wasn't Mason. That one hit different. It reminded me I wasn't crazy. That someone else saw it too. And that's the part no one understands. When you carry an invisible load for so long, you start to wonder if you imagine the weight. If the years of sacrificing, giving, shrinking were just in your head. But they weren't. They never were. I'd just been surrounded by people who needed me to believe it was normal. And now? Now that I'd stopped playing along, they were scrambling to rewrite the story. Week 7, my father finally called. No voicemail this time. Just rang until I picked up. Maybe he knew I wouldn't ignore it forever. Maybe he figured I'd answer out of habit. He wasn't wrong. "Daniel," he said, calm and deliberate. "We need to talk. Man to man." That phrase, man to man, used to mean something. When I was younger, it felt like a rite of passage. Like he was acknowledging me, inviting me into some quiet circle of respect. Yeah? It felt like a trap. We met at a diner just off the highway. Neutral territory, like two countries negotiating a ceasefire. He ordered coffee. I didn't order anything. "I don't know what this is," he said, gesturing vaguely in the air between us, "this cold shoulder thing. But it's gone on long enough." I said nothing. "You're hurting your mother," he continued. "She's barely sleeping. Mason's trying, he's really trying, but..." I held up a hand. "Stop. Just stop." He looked surprised. Not angry, just unprepared for resistance. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm done." "That's different." He leaned back like I'd just spoken in a language he didn't recognize. "You don't just stop being part of a family." "No," I said, "but you can stop being used by one." His jaw tightened. That familiar flicker of disapproval returned to his eyes, the one I used to shrink beneath when I was 10, 15, 25. "You sound bitter." "No. I sound tired." He tried a different tactic. Lowered his voice. Tilted his head. "We never asked for everything you did, Daniel." That was the part that stung most. Because it was true. They never asked. They just let it happen. And I let them. Because asking would have meant accountability. And silence? That was plausible deniability. That was easy. "You didn't have to ask," I said. "I was taught to step up. I thought that made me good. Turns out it just made me convenient." He didn't argue. He just sat there, blinking like I'd said something in code and he was still looking for the translation. I left first. Paid for his coffee on the way out like old habits still had a grip. But as I stepped outside and the cold air hit me, I realized something I hadn't before. They didn't see me as selfish. They saw me as broken. Because in their version of love, saying no was an act of betrayal. And I was finally fluent in saying it. It's amazing what happens when you stop playing your assigned part. People don't just get confused. They get angry. Not because you've changed, but because now they have to. See, I used to be the one who brought order. Who picked up the pieces Mason scattered without ever asking why he was always the one breaking things. I was the one who made sure birthdays were remembered, bills were paid, appointments kept. I was the son that made the whole illusion of family look functional. And now that I'd stepped away, it was unraveling. They didn't know who to be without me smoothing things over. That week, Mason posted a long thread online. Some dramatic reflection about emotional abandonment and how trauma echoes in silence. There was no name, but it was clear who it was aimed at. Comments poured in, supportive, sympathetic, validating. You're so brave. Some people only love with conditions. Don't let toxic energy drain your light. I didn't comment, didn't text, just stared at the screen and realized he was building a narrative where he was the victim, and I was the villain who disappeared when things got hard. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had a spreadsheet on my computer. 10 years worth of expenses, transfers, medical deductibles, utility payments, mortgage support, car repairs. I documented everything, not for revenge, not for proof, but because I needed to remind myself that it happened, that it was real. Invisible labor is funny that way. It erodes your memory. You start to question if maybe you were the one who exaggerated, if maybe you expected too much, if maybe you were the problem all along. But numbers don't lie. That spreadsheet didn't tell the story of a bitter sibling or a distant son. It told the story of a man who gave and gave, until he finally learned that giving without boundaries isn't love. The servitude, and love without respect, that's just a leash. It took them almost 2 months to try the one move I actually didn't see coming. My mom showed up at my office. No warning, no text. Just walked in like it was completely normal for her to interrupt a project planning session in front of my team. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, clutching her purse like it was armor. "Can we talk?" I stepped into the hallway, and before I could say anything, she started crying. Not wailing, not hysterical, just slow, practiced tears, perfectly timed to fall without smearing her eyeliner. "I don't know what we did," she whispered, "but you're tearing this family apart." I didn't flinch. I'd been preparing for this, some version of it, for weeks. Still, hearing those words out loud, it landed like a slap in reverse. Cold, calculated. "Mom," I said carefully, "I'm not tearing anything apart. I just stopped holding it together." She sniffled. "I know your father can be blunt. And Mason, he's always had a sensitive heart. He doesn't handle rejection well." Rejection. That's what this was now. My silence, my boundaries, my refusal to bankroll the family lifestyle was rejection? "I'm not rejecting anyone," I said. "I'm just opting out of being the solution to problems I didn't create." She touched my arm. "But we need you. You know how things are. Mason's still finding his footing, and the insurance is complicated. Just for a little while, until we stabilize." There it was, the real reason. Behind the emotion, beneath the tears, it always came down to the same thing: usefulness. I thought maybe she came to reconnect, to apologize, to see me. But no, she came because the foundation was cracking again, and I'd been the one they always called to patch it. This time, I didn't say yes. I didn't even say maybe. I just stepped back and said, "I have a meeting," and I walked away. Later that night, she sent a message. "I hope you're proud of yourself." Not, "I hope you're okay." Not, "I understand." Just that. And for the first time in a long time, I was. By month 3, their desperation had evolved into strategy. No more guilt. No more public sympathy posts. This time it was leverage. A letter showed up at my apartment, hand-delivered, not mailed, folded neatly, tucked in an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photocopy of a loan application. My name was listed as a guarantor. It was from 2 years ago. A small business loan Mason had taken out for a creative project that never materialized. Apparently, my parents had used my financial record, my tax history, credit profile, to strengthen the application. I remembered the vague conversation. "Just some paperwork," my dad had said over the phone. "We're listing you as a reference, nothing binding." Turns out it was binding. Turns out the loan defaulted. $35,000. And now collections were circling because Mason, in his infinite freedom, had never made a single payment. I didn't yell. Didn't rage. I just sat there, holding the letter, realizing that this entire time, while I'd been covering their bills and playing the role of quiet provider, they'd been laying traps in my name. I called the bank. They confirmed what I already knew. The documents were signed. The guarantor was real. Me. When I confronted my parents by email, this time I kept it short. Did you know about this loan? Was I ever supposed to find out, or did you just assume I'd pay when the calls started coming? My mother's reply came quickly. We didn't think it would come to that. Mason had a plan. We believed in him. We needed to believe in someone. That line nearly knocked the breath out of me. We needed to believe in someone. Not in me. Not in the one who paid, planned, and protected. No. They needed to believe in the idea of Mason. The myth of his untapped potential. The story where he just needed one more shot. One more boost. One more sacrifice from someone who knew how to keep it together. That night, I sat in my living room and looked around at my quiet space, my worn-out couch, the calendar still marked from weekly errands I no longer did. And I made a decision. I was done playing custodian to other people's illusions. They wanted to believe in someone? Fine. Let them believe I was finally gone. After the letter, I did what they never expected. Nothing. I didn't reply. Didn't call. Didn't threaten legal action or demand repayment. I didn't even show up to explain myself. Because the truth was, I didn't need closure. I needed distance. I met with a lawyer, quiet, competent, discreet. He reviewed the loan documents, grimaced, and said, "You've got a case." Fraud, maybe. Definitely misrepresentation. But I shook my head. "I don't want to sue my family," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" I looked at him and, for the first time in months, said it out loud. "I want out." I wasn't trying to recover what they owed me. I was trying to reclaim what I'd given freely for years: time, energy, self-respect. The version of me who believed that if you gave enough, people would eventually love you back the right way. That version was gone. In his place was someone else, someone quieter, yes, but not smaller. Someone sharper. That weekend, I cleaned out my home office. Found old notebooks full of budgets and grocery lists I used to manage for them. I kept one, just one page, where I'd scribbled, Mason's dentist, $340/rent shortfall, $600/mom's prescription, $89. No one ever asked how I covered it, or what I gave up to make it work. They didn't want to know, because knowing means responsibility, and my family has always had an allergy to that. A few days later, my mom sent another message. "We miss you. The holidays are coming. Maybe we can put this behind us." There was no apology, just an invitation to reset the clock, to pretend nothing happened, that the foundation hadn't rotted through. But I didn't need an apology. I needed to not go back. So I didn't reply. I booked a cabin. Out of state. No reception. No drama. No performance. Just peace. And for the first time in a long time, I spent a holiday not cooking, not driving, not fixing. Just breathing. The thing about pulling away is it leaves a hole. And eventually, someone always tries to fill it. Mason started reaching out again. Not directly to me, he wouldn't do that. But to people I used to trust. A coworker I hadn't spoken to in months messaged me. "Hey, just a heads up, your brother DM'd me on LinkedIn. Said he's expanding into consulting and asked if I had any leads." Consulting. That's rich. Mason had never held down a job long enough to understand what a project life cycle was, let alone deliver one. But now that I'd gone silent and taken my resources with me, he was trying on my clothes like a kid raiding his older brother's closet. Only they didn't fit. Another message came from an old college friend. "Your mom called. Asked if I'd talk to you. Said the family's been through enough and it's time to come back together." Come back together. Like this was a mutual break. Like it hadn't been years of quiet expectations stacked so high I couldn't even see the top anymore. I started seeing them for what they were, not people who missed me, but people who missed the function I performed. The financial support, the emotional predictability, the insurance that no matter what mess they created, someone would always be there to clean it up. That someone had been me. Not anymore. They weren't adjusting to my absence. They were circling it. Trying to find the edges. Trying to figure out what I wanted in return for coming back. But that was the thing. I didn't want anything. I didn't want revenge, or apologies, or some dramatic confession at the dinner table. I didn't want them to cry or beg or finally recognize all the years I gave them the best of me while they saved their praise for Mason's unfinished art projects. I just wanted to be free. And for once I was. But freedom has a price. And mine was watching people I once loved slowly realize I was never coming back to the role they built around me. I had quit the play. And the stage was starting to creak. I thought the silence would eventually settle. That if I held my ground long enough, they'd move on. Maybe even respect the boundary. But manipulators don't respect silence. They just treat it like a vacuum that needs to be filled. That's why the last message hit differently. It came from Mason, surprisingly direct this time. "They're talking about selling the house. Dad's blood pressure's worse. Things are bad, Dan. I know I've screwed up, but we need help. Just a little. Please. 2 words stood out. We and need. As if the past hadn't happened. As if everything that led me here, the ignored boundaries, the misused trust, the $35,000 loan I never signed for but still wore like a collar, had simply been washed away by time. It was tempting. Not because I wanted to help Mason, but because that old voice in my head, the one they installed early, the one that equated love with responsibility, whispered, "They're still your family." But then I remembered something my therapist once said, back when I was first learning to uncoil from a lifetime of overfunctioning. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face their own consequences. So I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into my banking app, checked the balance that used to shrink every time their needs expanded, and reminded myself what it took to rebuild that number day by day, dollar by dollar, decision by decision. I didn't owe them another rescue. They weren't drowning. They were refusing to swim. Later that night, I got one final voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded flat. Not angry. Not desperate. Just resigned. "I guess this is who you are now." I stared at the screen a long time before hitting delete. Because no, this isn't who I am now. This is who I always was. They just never noticed. A funny thing happens when you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. You start to see just how much of your life was spent shrinking. Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. Shrinking your needs, your voice, your presence, so the people around you could stay comfortable. So they wouldn't feel guilty. So they wouldn't have to look in the mirror and see who they really were. But once you stop shrinking, they call it selfish. They call it cold. They call it ungrateful. Because for people who only love you when you're useful, dignity looks like betrayal. By month 4, the calls stopped. The messages dried up. The public jabs faded. My mother posted a recipe instead of a guilt-ridden parable. Mason stopped subtweeting. My father, I imagine, went back to talking about the weather. The silence wasn't peace. It was vacancy. The kind that settles in when people finally accept that their leverage is gone. And I didn't celebrate it. I mourned it. Not the people, not the manipulations, the guilt, the years I can't get back. I mourned what I hoped it could have been. A family where love didn't have strings. Where giving wasn't mistaken for weakness. Where being the strong one didn't mean being the silent one. But you can't mourn forever. Eventually, you stand up, take a breath, and step forward. And that's what I did. I changed my number. Took a new job 2 states away. Gave the furniture I used to buy for them to someone who needed it and wouldn't ask for more. I stopped explaining. Because people who never listen don't deserve closure. And people who only came around when something was broken? They don't get to complain when the repairman finally packs up and leaves. The last time I saw them was a chance encounter. 6 months after I'd walked away, I ran into my mother at a grocery store just outside town. She was standing near the deli, staring at a rotisserie chicken like it held the answer to something bigger. She didn't notice me at first. And for a moment, I thought about turning around, pretending I hadn't seen her. It would have been easy. Clean. But I didn't. I walked past slowly, gave a polite nod, nothing more, and kept moving. That's when she saw me. Her face tightened like she wasn't sure whether to smile or cry or scream. She took a half step toward me, then stopped. I could see it in her eyes, that battle between pride and pain. Between the story she told herself and the reality standing in front of her. She didn't say my name. She didn't say anything. And neither did I. Because there's a kind of grief that doesn't get a funeral. When the people who raised you lose access to you, not because you disappeared, but because you finally decided you mattered, too, they mourn differently. They don't cry. They rewrite. They tell anyone who'll listen that you changed. That you cut them off. That you forgot where you came from. But I didn't forget. I remembered everything. The bills. The nights. The thankless holidays. The one sentence in that will. I remembered all of it. And that's exactly why I left. Walking out of that store, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Like I'd finally set down a weight I was never meant to carry. And in that quiet exit, no confrontation, no closure, just a man walking past the people who once claimed him. I knew something they never would. You can spend your whole life trying to earn a love that only exists when you're useful. Or you can walk away. And finally be free.